Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our, I think this is now the third session of today, fourth session of the day, uh, on the back of the API monetization discussion that we just concluded with Michelle, James, and Anmol. We thought we're going to be pairing that up with a real-world use case of the world of API governance, monetization, and payment systems. And we're going to be exploring how you can scale with confidence inside Paymenttools API governance evolution. There's going to be a case study. This is going to be presented by none other than Robert. I'm going to let you do your own introduction shortly, but this is going to give you a real-world taste of what some of the API governance consideration, implementation, especially in the world of payments and financial services from a monetization standpoint would look like. So take it away. Once again, questions, Q&A segment is live as well as the chat. Feel free to ask your question. I'll be back at the end of the session to take your questions and put it back to Robert. Over to you, Robert.
Thank you very much, Buddha. Also the talk of the tap bank, which is also gives some kind of a background more from the banking perspective, how the governance journey was. And I now want to give you more a perspective of how this looks like more in the fintech environment, because that's where our journey started, and also which challenges we had at the beginning, especially. My name is Robert Scherbarth. I'm currently the head of platform in Paymenttools, so I'm responsible for everything around infrastructure in there as well. And I also grow in that role, so that we will see in a minute. But let's first start who we are. Hopefully everything works out, because we had some issues with the technique. Yes. Thank you. Yes, we are Paymenttools, so we are a fintech company. We're providing various payment solutions, especially white label solutions for different purposes. We have a team of 170 people, and we are split it into 5 locations, and also our people coming from 25 nations. To give you also some context, we heard a lot of talks about people from the UK and also the US. And can you go one slide further, Buddha? Yes. And that Paymenttools is a sub-company on top of in the Rewe Group context. Rewe is one of Europe's largest retailers, so we are more located in the EU. Currently, we offer our services in 4 countries, which is Germany, Austria, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic. We also don't want to be, we are a spin-off of the Rewe Group, but we also want to build solutions for other partners, and we want to scale more on fintech solution. But in that case, Rewe is currently more our sponsor. This is good that we have such a big sponsor, but this also has some challenges as well. So Rewe is one of Europe's biggest Girocard transaction system, if you will. And we have also other ideas for other value streams as well. And that's why we needed to care about how we scale as a smaller company into that large organization. Yes. For that, I need to go 4 years back. So 4 years back, Paymenttools was founded, and then the spin-off of Rewe Group started, and I was the 5th engineer, so to speak, internally. That's why I was also relating to the other talk, which were mentioned. We had a lot of external contractors as well. So we started also at one point 4 years ago, but we also started with a lot of external partners that help us on the speed level. Talking about speed. Yes, thank you. We started with a more simple organization model. That was also one thing we had. Our leadership back in the days, it was very driving and we wanted to fast-paced environment, and we wanted to deliver fast, different product than the transactions we managed so far. So we started with small agile teams who owning their entire stack, which was great from delivering first artifacts, delivering first products, or delivering also first business ideas. And that had also the challenge that the teams are drifted apart from how consistent they deliver their stuff. And there was not, on this more business level, not a keen wake-up call why we needed to care about APIs, but there was multiple things that were growing under the hood. So every team had their own challenge also to onboard new things. Every team had the same challenge. I need to provide some public API. And back in the days, we had also some kind of review sessions every 2 weeks, and it was always the same topic. One team was building an OAuth pattern for their stuff, and then they delivered it. Then the other team built also an OAuth pattern, but in a different fashion as well. And they also started to tackling the same problem again and again. Also, we had some variation in our error management so that our customers didn't get different error messages as well, but we are from the same company, which also would not follow. But even with that, more on the product side and the misalignment there was still a bigger problem, and that is one slide wider. Thank you. That we need to take care about audits because we are in a fintech space and we are a regulated area. And we started then also to do our first audits, which was more the PCI in this kind of case, because we wanted to provide e-com solution. Obviously, we needed to store some kind of credit cards data. And we are in a regulatory environment as well, which then means that our advantage of speed and deliver things fast now falls apart because we get questions that we have a misalignment, we have different security patterns in place. And also this was more and more where we then slowed down a little bit. And there was also the developer pain in that they have to do more governance work, which they don't want because this abstracts them more and more from delivering products. So as this pain was growing and growing, we were establishing an idea or vision where we wanted to go. And the idea was to have a composable ecosystem of intentionally designed APIs that empower developers, partners, consumers to deliver desired outcomes. That is a mouthful. But the idea was not to add a layer of control, but also more building a foundation where we want to start on and also where we want now to trigger the change, what we want to achieve in terms of API governance. And for that, we built, thank you, have some kind of pillars of change, I called it here, but we needed some kind of guidance where we go through and some kind of checklist. And the most important part was the management support, that we get in buy-in from the leadership, that we can change it because it's not only a technical change, but also more like a cultural change where we need to adapt certain things to also have a lot of alignment to the company in very different areas, not only on engineering or technology. We know that our leadership back in the days was very focused on speed, so developer efficiency should not be a thing. So the new thing we want to build should not be a bottleneck or something. And we wanted to centralize the security and central governance around that API topic. So then let's start into leadership. Convincing the leadership wasn't easy back in the days. There was a lot of things because, as I said, speed was the main priority. We wanted to deliver stuff. And we also wanted not only start as a project, because we know that if we are building an API platform, this is more like a product, or this is more like a continuous thing we need to have, not only a project, but it's finished in a time. And to convincing them that they, at the end, losing revenue because of the audit and governance requirements was a challenge, but we could convince them with some kind of business use cases around that topic. And it was a lot of talks and understanding that we need to take to get the mandate that we can drive this initiative, which also means we needed to shift these individual ownership model, which I showed you before, also to more like a shared responsibility model. And there was, if you can go one slide next, yes. And that was the biggest thing is like that we then introduced platform engineering. What does it mean? Who never heard about that? That is kind of back in the days, the old infrastructure teams were given, and platform engineering is more like a newer approach where you also deliver a platform products for the teams, and the API product is one of them for us, where we excluded or moved the platform or DevOps engineers from the teams into a centralized team to provide things for the developer itself. And there was also a lot of skepsis around that because at the beginning, our teams had a lot of freedom to do what they want. They can release and also deliver products and the things. And now we're taking a little bit away their responsibility, but we wanted to give them freedom that they can focus on business topics, but centralizing security compliance and also the infrastructure itself. And that was a tough journey also to convince all the teams, also including a lot of talks, onboarding sessions and stuff like that. But we convinced them that it is the way we want to go. And before we built then also the API platform itself, we designed some principles we wanted to follow in terms of the API platform. And the biggest part was the consistency. I mentioned it sometimes, but we wanted to have certain security patterns in place. We wanted also to simplify it for the developer, and we wanted to align company-wide on these things. We also wanted to keep developer experience high, which means like we wanted to give governance out of the box so that the developer don't need to care how do I need to release a change of my API to a certain thing. What do I need to document? What is here? We want somebody to automate that. And so that we maybe keep the speed of the API delivery, but maybe also accelerate it a little bit because a lot of questions are already answers to release new APIs. And we wanted to drive also that APIs are considered more like a product, not like a thing we need to build to integrate with some partner. Also to adapting or increasing the value of the API itself. With that architecture place, yeah, we come here to the most technical picture, I hope. And you see in the middle of that, that is the Tike Gateway, which is the heart of our API platform. And we had a lot of good experience with that. So with Tike together, we implemented such a platform, but especially in our environment, Tike is one part of that, and we needed to implement some things around that as well. So with that, we introduced a lot of security patterns in front of Tike. So every API currently is provided via Tike. And with Tike together, we implemented these kind of security patterns, but we also have now every request in control what we have. We can manage all that stuff on an operational basis. In terms of compliance, we can also leverage Tike as more like a demilitarized zone that we can route traffic to more like a higher compliance area, but also to an area where we have more freedom to not have high regulations, but the developer have more freedom to play there. The SRE team is also very happy that we're now monitoring all that stuff. But the most important part of the financial topic is that we now implemented a self-service to apply API and API changes to Tike directly. We reinvented a little bit our own structure based on open API standards, but we also wanted to include documentation as well. So everything is currently available via some own API or own YAML with API format, if you will, which directly automate and abstract all that from the developer itself. And everything is automated via Git and the self-service. I will take the governance part will come later on via Backstage and our self-service. And we also directly propagate the data to an external developer portal. If we can go to the next one. Yes, you saw it a little bit. So now we land on 4 patterns we currently provide as authorization patterns, authentication patterns, which is like OAuth for more user or mobile app integration. We have API key pattern in place to server communication. We are heavily invested in MTLS because we have a lot of use cases more in the IoT space, which means like terminal integrations and stuff like that, or virtual terminals, where we need to manage certificates in a way and also authenticate them. And since we are in Europe and some partners we want to integrate are more not familiar with this kind of, I assume, modern patterns of authentication, we also have IP filters in place to get the traffic to our system. And if you can go next, yes. Yeah, there we have our compliance automation. And I mentioned it before in the architecture picture. We are heavily using Git and GitOps approach to have a change process where we really can follow, where we also can integrate different approval mechanisms. Here you see an example. If a developer want to make a change, he need to request it via Git. It's get automatically validated. We can integrate 4S principle to get an approval. Here in this example, it would be an SRE. And after the approval, this change will go to production and we are safe. We have it documented. We can apply some rules on that based on PCI and ISO compliance and deliver changes in a central manner, which also means that the teams can now directly deploy. There is no questions. We have one pattern to do so, and we are regulatory compliant in that way. At the end of the case study, at the end of the initiative, so where we are now, most of the APIs are onboarded. There are 5%, I would say, are not onboarded to a new system because since we are also very in an integrative business, that's currently not possible, not from our side, but more from the partner side. We increased stability because we, as I said, the observability really increased in terms of how traffic we get and how the standardization was working, so that we can have now fewer incidents and also can resolve them faster. We managed multiple audits during the last two years, which is PCI and ISO and also CRITIS. And most of the time, the developers on our side are very satisfied how we are building that self-service, also making the documentation available. We do not via conference, but via Backstage itself for the internal people, which is also regulated in that way. And yeah, adoption rate has been so fantastic. And let's come where we are not ready and where we want to go in the future. So as I said, we wanted to also emphasize more as API as a product around that topic. We are now strong more on the governance side, I would say. But now what is the next step? We have build a community of practice around that topic that heavily invest into how we want to version APIs, how we want to do different things, how we continuously improve our APIs and approach that future on. So that is one thing we are investing now. We are currently have a look into what we do with the data we have. And we had the talk beforehand with the monetization. We are not there yet. We get a lot of operational data, which is good. But how can we leverage it more? How can we monetize that? That's also a thing we currently start to investing. And we also want to extend API governance. So we are, in our business case, always some kind of a middleman. And we also have the challenge that a lot of partners are not on the level as we are, I would say, in terms of API standardization, API governance. A lot of, at least in Europe, and partners of us are very file-driven based business, and we really need to convince them also to moving there or scaling up that a little bit in terms of having this kind of standard as well, that we do communication only via REST and APIs and have proper authentication patterns as well. And not the last slide, but key takeaway maybe for you. As I said at the beginning, this change was not only technical, and my career had a lot of technical projects that were not successfully in a way. That was more so all like a cultural change, and that begins at a leadership level, but also ends up on the engineering level, where we really changed our system and roles and shared responsibility. And this change was not driven by tech, but more driven by people, and the people who were engaged make that success possible, that we also have now a good technical platform at the end. With that said, thank you very much. And now I would be open for questions. Sorry for the technical issues, and Buddha had to click for me.
No worries at all. That worked quite smoothly. That's a very, very valuable journey that you took us on, because, like you say, there are obviously layers to maturity, and how you not just need the technical alignment, but you need to have the business and the team and the people and the process all sort of working cohesively towards that direction to get us there. It's that full culture, both technical and non-technical, coming together. So great talk. We do have a couple of questions, so let's pick the first one. Aaron asks, how many APIs do you have? How many employees are on the governance team? And are the governance employees 100% focused on just purely API governance? 3 questions in there. So let's
Oh,
start
3
with
questions.
how many
Okay.
APIs? How many
APIs is
do you have?
like 50. Do we have at the moment? Um,
Okay.
How many people do we have in the government? That's complicated because since we are on the smaller side, this is currently more like spread it in multiple teams. So the technical change itself is, as I mentioned, on SRE, they ensure the governance, so to speak, that if a change compliance or if there is a risk in terms of a change, that SRE is responsible to monitoring that. And we have also an own compliance team who will challenge that and give up some policies, but
Okay.
but
So
it's more spread in different departments, I would say, at the moment. There's no central governance team in that kind of way, in that flow.
That's an interesting point, because usually we've seen governance teams can follow different models. Like a very typical model tends to be like that centralized API governance model, where you've got one centralized team that's looking after everything associated with API governance, kind of like what Aaron is sort of
Okay.
alluding to. But
Yeah,
then there is also distributed teams. So would you say yours is a bit more, I guess, on the distributed side at this point?
yeah, exactly. So it's more on this reason. And what I did not mention is also the community of practice, where they come together and especially have that
Yes.
topic for audit governance. Yes. So it's more like this is a virtual team, but there are 2 areas in terms of operations and also a direct governance, but its governance seems more focused on regulatory aspects, not only APIs.
Got it. Okay. Second question here is, how do you expose your internal API documentation for developers to use differently from exposing API documentation for external? So how do you sort of segregate the internal and the external consumers of your API documentation?
And then, or the developer decides on that. So we have a pattern that, as I said, we have a self-service for that, and one attribute of exposing an API is that you can say it's internally or or it should be externally available. Then it would be also demanding some documentation or external documentation, which is a little bit more than internal documentation. So there's some kind of a split in our self-service we build.
Would you say, does the sort of open API spec that you might be using at this point, does that sort of handle some of those documentation initially, and then you pair that up with something else? Like, how does your sort of documentation
Yes,
strategy
that
look
or
like?
using heavily open APIs documentation or spec for the documentation. Yes, but in the self-service, the developer can decide if he wants to expose it externally also, or is it only an internal API. And that also decides if the documentation is propagated to our external developer portal or not.
Got it. Okay. You also mentioned something about sort of your journey that you've taken. You talked a little bit about the problems and the sort of the way your API governance evolved. If today someone is taking their sort of step one in that journey of API governance, maybe in a similar starting point as you are, maybe it's a little bit different, smaller, bigger scale, we don't know yet. But if they were to go down that path, like what would be sort of a recommendation? What would you do differently today now that you've already been on this journey?
So back in the days, it was not only more my decision, but I at least would start with some kind of idea where at least the technical platform will what the vision of that is. So at least that we started, there was we were super business driven, and it was a
Right.
little bit lacking of where the technical vision is or on par with that with the product vision. And if I would start the journey again, I would start also with some kind of vision where the technical platform that supports
Right.
it product should look like.
That's again an interesting point, because when we looked at sort of platform engineering teams and how the makeup sort of the successful teams have that makeup done, there is always a product owner. Like I think you touched upon that already. You think about your APIs as product. Your platforms also need to be not just technical platforms, but products. So product owners really make a big difference. But again, if they are business facing by definition, a good tactic is to pair them up with sort of solution architects or lead architects, so that you can kind of have those shared vision from both business and technical side of things.
Exactly, and both need challenge them all the time where we're heading through. That's
I can imagine that. We've got one more question here. Do you use CLIs for governance enforcement within your CI/CD pipeline at this point?
at this point we don't use CLIs. We are using more workflows in Git itself, which are doing the compliance and validation checks. Yeah.
All right. And what was that journey, sort of setting up your entire GitOps, maybe CI/CD pipeline up? Like, was that sort of a step-by-step journey to include different deployment patterns, operating systems, or sorry, automated testing solutions? Any of those sort of being brought in step by step? Did you have that all sort of sorted at the beginning? What did that journey look like?
That's a great question on both sides, even from the provider, but also from the consumer side, because at the beginning it was very hard to explain also what benefits it does, especially on the GitOps area, because also there was some fear that it introduced more complexity. And that is true, it introduced complexity, but at least in our fintech environment, it really helps the governance part, which we now see that leveraging. So that's now, I don't know, some years down the line, we also started step by step. But now some audits are really easy, or some parts of audits are very easy because we have a change process, we have a change log, we have an approval process based on Git, which really easen up the process for that, so that we don't have to use, or the developer don't have to use any other tooling, and staying in their consistent tooling with its Git.
Amazing. All right. Well, thank you so much. I think we are at time. If there is any final question coming from everybody else, I'm happy to take that, but we are literally 30 seconds away from the close of the session. Thank you so much, Robert. This has been an absolutely fantastic session. Once again, taking people through this journey of API governance, especially in the context of financial services vertical. That's really, really helpful. So appreciate it. Thank you so much. Folks in the audience, if you did not get a chance or opportunity to ask questions, Robert's been attending all of our sessions already. It's going to be in the lobby as well, and you can find him on LinkedIn. So feel free to connect with him and ask your questions directly if that helps you a little bit more. So thank you once again, Robert. Hopefully this was a great session. We are heading into lunch/refreshment break right now. It's a 20-minute break, slightly longer than your usual. When we come back, we're going to be talking about FDX in action. We'll be exploring some of the frameworks that you can employ to adopt FDX as part of your organization. We'll also bring in the flavor of where Tyke as an API management platform can help you in that journey as well. So stay tuned, come back in 20 minutes time. We will see you in the next session. Thank you once again, Robert. See you on the other side.